Good morning, everyone. This is the Vermont House Committee on Commerce and Economic Development. It is Thursday, March 15, 2025 at 9:03 in the morning. We're here to take a look at a draft that will go into the education bill, but this is pertaining to career technical education. I have our legislative counsel with us, Beth St. James. Beth, good morning. Thank you for your quick work on this bill. Just to tee it up a little bit, this committee has been charged with looking at restructuring career technical education in the state. We're working with the education committee as well as working with Ways and Means. When the time comes, we'll start those discussions on financing. Right now, we're just looking at governance and restructuring CTE in the state. This is a first draft. This is not the last draft. So I want to make sure that everyone that's here, everyone that's listening, once we've presented this, I'm sure there'll be some questions for Beth. But we encourage everyone to get in touch with Anna Grace or myself or the vice chair to come in. And next week, we're open all week to having those discussions and trying to craft this bill into something that is going to make a real good change for CTE in the state. I will say the 10 years that this committee has been charged with workforce, we've been working on career technical education, trying to make changes. We've nibbled around the edges a little bit, had a hard time with getting any buy-in from even our education committee, from AOE. Everybody was busy doing, the regular school thing. I think this is the first time I really feel optimistic that we're going to make the changes that are necessary to make sure that all students have the ability to get into CTE if they so choose. And I think it will help our workforce in the state. So I'm really optimistic. And so we're willing to work with everyone and everyone. We want to hear from everyone, and we'll work together to craft this. And we may all not get everything we want, but I think in the end, it will. I think we'll be better for it. So, anything else you want to add, Edie?
I think that's great. Thank you.
So, Beth, if you'd like to share your screen and walk us through this first iteration. And again, thank you for your hard work on this, especially during vacation.
What, I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that one. Thank you. Good morning, Beth St. James, Office of Legislative Counsel. I am your education policy attorney. So I think this is my first time appearing in this committee, at least this session. So it's nice to meet or see you all, as the case may be. And I appreciate the chair teeing this up. This is very much a first draft. So I brought my red pen with me. Just trying to find the right window to share here. There we go. Okay. So this is a committee bill. And what I suggest we do is we do kind of a high level walkthrough, and then we can go back at your direction for the pieces that you want more detail on. How does that work?
Sounds good.
Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually not look at this bill, and I'm just going to here. I'm going to pull up. You have this linked on your website. So this is Title 16 is our education title. Pretty much everything to do with education lives here. There's some in tax and there's some sprinkled throughout all the other titles. But it's all your education stuff is pretty much in Title 16, including career and technical education for state law, right? There's lots of federal law that's we're not dealing with right now. So I just wanted to kind of orient you to what current law currently looks like. And I'm not going to take you through all of these. I'm just actually going to show you the organization of the career and technical chapter. So it starts with the purpose and some definitions. The State Board of Education is kind of the overseer of career and technical education. And so there's a subchapter on what that looks like. There's a subchapter on local career technical education programs. There's a subchapter on eligibility and tuition. There's a subchapter on state financial assistance. There's a subchapter on regional career technical center school districts, which is primarily what we're going to be looking at today. And then there's a subchapter on post-secondary career and technical education, which we're not going to touch at all today. Post-secondary, that's after high school, right? So one thing I can do to orient you to kind of understanding the draft you have before you is to talk about the difference between a local career technical education program in subchapter 3 and a regional career technical center school district. So there's 3 ways CTE centers, right? The building or the program that has all of the programs and the teachers where the kids go, the center. Most centers are operated by individual school districts. They are owned and operated by a school district, and they have service regions where kiddos are kind of assigned. If they want to participate in a CTE program, they would be going to that CTE center operated by a school district. Over there. Okay. Yes. The second kind of model is this regional career technical center school district. I believe there are about 4 centers that are actually owned and operated by a regional career technical center school district, which is a standalone school district for just the CTE center and program. And this is all current law. What would happen is school districts in one of those service regions would get together. They would decide that it makes sense for a whole host of reasons, and there's a process that they have to follow for that analysis, that instead of one school district owning a center and all of these other school districts sending kiddos to that school district, essentially, we're going to create a brand new standalone school district just to operate this career and technical center. And then all of those school districts that were sending kiddos to the elementary, high school, career technical center school district are now just sending their CTE students to the school district that's owning and operating just the CTE center. And then there are 2 independent schools that run CTE centers that we send kiddos to. This regional career technical center school district model is what I have based draft 1.1 on. So the first thing we're going to do is repeal all of that subchapter, and we're going to replace it with a new subchapter. So that's what section 1 is doing. It's repealing subchapter 5A. And then section 2 is making a new subchapter 5A. And that new subchapter 5A is statewide career and technical education school district. So section 1571, I'm just going to read this verbatim. The provision of career and technical education in the state shall be provided through a single statewide career and technical education school district, subject to the provisions of this subchapter. And then the rest of the subchapter is kind of the governance for this school district, this statewide CTE school district. There's so much more work that needs to go into this bill to make it operational. I just want to point that out. So if you have a question, you're like, oh my gosh, where is this? Great point. I'll make a note of it. It may just not be the time for it to appear in this draft yet. So I just want to acknowledge there's a lot more to operationalize this. So.
You can definitely ask them, but yeah, you should.
Perfect. So section 1572 is we're creating service regions. So right now,
I do have so we're talking about one school district for CTE. That's what this bill is.
yes,
Just wanted to throw things down. Actually, I think that this is a good idea. And I assume that you'll be able to, let's say, somebody in St. Albans wants to use not mechanical engineering, fabrication. I know that Would you be sending them to like Central Vermont where they have fabrication for CT?
I would suggest that we walk through the bill.
Okay.
And then those details will probably bubble up.
Okay,
But spoiler alert, what this is doing is creating a statewide governance structure for all of the CTE centers and programs and creating a school board that would make the policies for where kiddos are going. So that level of detail may not be in this bill.
okay.
So, the state board currently defines the service regions for career and technical education and in a rule series, and that rule series has not been updated since 2002. So what I did in creating these service regions for this statewide school district is I used and this is also linked on your website. I used bear with me, I thought I had this all up and apparently I didn't. So because there has been so much consolidation and change amongst school districts since 2002, I used the Career and Technical Centers regional school calendars from the Agency of Education's website to set the service regions for this bill. This is all policy choice. These are not legal choices. This is all policy. So if you don't like it, you can change it. But I'm just orienting you to where these regions came from. So the regions are set up.
So when you say that you use the calendar, so the section on the far left side that says district, those are the districts that you.
Yes, so, yep, so the technical center is in blue, and there's actually a link to, I'm not sure where it takes you, but we're not gonna go there right now. And then all of the, these are,
Can I back it up more than that?
sure,
So on our map on the wall here, we have the different regions.
yeah,
And because the rules haven't been updated in such a long time, it's really hard to know which schools are still, or which districts, which governance school district, right? It could be a supervisory unit, are still operating and how they are in that region. And so what Beth did is she took those regions and tried to capture which schools are in those regions today using information piecemeal because there's no clear place to get that right now. So that's all. Is that fair?
I think that's fair, and I'm making some assumptions here, and we all know what assume stands for, so. If your goal is to fit this structure within a larger education transformation, and if that larger education transformation involves the creation of new school districts, this is all going to need to change at some point, right? And so what I thought would be most helpful, and this is just me, my job is to do what you all feel most helpful, so feedback is welcome, is to take that as your vice chair just said, the best grouping that I have right now, I think, is that calendar. So I've listed the tech centers, the supervisory union or supervisory district, the school district, and the towns within them, so that it's kind of one-stop shopping, so that if you are looking at a transformation proposal that has different school districts, and those school districts are made up of towns, right? You can find those towns within this draft or whatever other draft you're doing and kind of figure it out that way, rather than try and figure out, well, the Champlain Valley Supervisory District is currently made up of which towns, and now it's part of this larger school district. So I think your finished product will be much more streamlined than this and prettier than this. But for now, I thought it was best to give you all of the information possible to help you understand what parts of the state are going where. Does that make sense? Okay. So Again, this is all policy. So the Burlington Technical Center and Center for Technology Essex region is formed by these member supervisory unions, supervisory districts, their member school districts, and then their member towns. I don't think it's the best use of our time to go through all of that, but I'm looking to you all. How do you want to, what level of detail do you want it for the regions?
Yeah, I would agree. I don't think we need to go.
Okay.
I think we're.
Okay.
I think we're gonna change.
Okay. I will just note there's a little bit of highlighting on here. So there's the Central Vermont Career Center. And then again, these are all of the school districts and SUs and SDs and the towns associated with them on those that associated on the regional calendar. And it's the same for each of the 15 service regions in this draft.
Just add one more thing too. We're going to talk about representation from each of these areas. I'm jumping ahead. The areas are very different sizes right now, very different. And so probably it doesn't make sense for statewide representation to be the way it's listed here. But again, this is our starting point, right? Just to be really, really clear, this is a starting point so that we can have a lot of information together and we can start talking about that's it.
And certainly Gov also have to weigh in with us as well.
Yes, I am your education policy attorney. I am not your elections law attorney. So that will definitely play into this. So for example, the Burlington Technical Center and Center for Technology Essex, those are two separate tech centers. But look at how large of a population is being sent to those two centers. You've got Burlington, CVU, Colchester, Essex Westford, Franklin West, Milton, Mount Mansfield, South Burlington, and Winooski. Those are all going to two tech centers. And then the Green Mountain Technology Center. Let's see, there's one that's really small. Cold Hollow. Franklin North Supervisory Union. It's got two school districts in it. So there these service regions, and I'm sure that the field has a lot of information for you on why the service regions are the way they are. But when we get to representation on a governing body, it's a little bit of a different math than what is the need in the community versus what does the Constitution require for proportional representation. So anyway, 15 service regions based on the AOE regional calendar. The highlighting is representing places on the regional calendar where a supervisory union or a school district appeared twice, and I didn't know what to do with it, so I put them in both places and highlighted it. Again, 15 service regions takes us to page 11. Okay, so everything above page 11 is creating those service regions. Starting on page 11, line 17, school board membership. So again, starting place. The board of the statewide CTE school district shall be composed of 15 voting members, concurrently serving as members of the member supervisory union boards, appointed by the superintendents of each service region. So that would be the superintendents of each service region getting together and picking one member from their boards. And that person would be appointed to serve on the school board here. You can do many different things to create the school board. Without a larger scale governance structure, right now we have 119 school districts and 52 supervisory units. All of them have their own boards. If you were to, let's say, have each service region elect their representative to the school board, that's great. That's an option. But that's going to trigger a constitutional analysis under the Equal Protection Clause of the US Constitution for proportional representation. And that is an analysis that goes into, for example, legislative redistricting. So to keep this simple to start with, an appointment is not going to trigger that same analysis that an election would. So to start with, I've got appointments in here. if you are transforming the whole education system and you end up with 17 or 15 school districts, how you figure out how to make up a school board is probably going to look very different than trying to figure out how the makeup of the school board looks with 119 school districts. So again, very much a starting place. And then I have the superintendent of the statewide school district would be a non-voting member of the board, and the board can appoint other non-voting members such as students to serve on the board. Members are going to serve 2 years until their successor is appointed. A majority of the members constitute a quorum. They've got to select a board chair and a board clerk. The board clerk has to prepare minutes. The board clerk may be paid upon order of the board. This is all taken from current law, either in the regional CTE school district structure or borrowed from union school district structures. And my guess is, depending on what the transformation as a whole looks like, this could be flushed out with a lot more detail. So what is this school board responsible for? I have taken the duties and authority of the regional CTE school districts and plunked it in here for the duties and authorities of the statewide school board. And that is, their duties and authorities are very similar to what your local municipal school districts, school boards are doing. They set the educational policies for the tech center, which I imagine would be who goes where, how are, if there's one aviation program in the state, how do we decide, how many kiddos go there? So they set all the policies. That's very similar to how your school districts run now. Your school districts set all of the policies for your school districts, including things like intra-district choice, right? So this is a very common concept that the school board is setting the policies for the district. They can take any action required for the sound administration of the district. That is, again, current law, and it's the same for the regional CTE school boards and your local municipal school boards. They would have possession, care, control, and management of the property.
Sir. So
Go ahead.
If you want me to wait,
We're doing.
we can wait. I can wait.
Let's
Yep.
Beth go through it and then we'll.
Yep.
They have possession, care, control, and management of the property. They have to keep the buildings and grounds in good repair. They can lease or purchase property. They have to establish and maintain a system for receipt, deposit, disbursement, accounting, etc. They've got to establish a system of accounts. They can sue and be sued. They can enter into contracts. The school district will be the employer for all of the CTE employees in all of the centers, the directors, the educators, etc. Instead of being the employees of local school districts, they would now be the employees of this statewide school district. They would all have one employer. There is a whole host of questions and concerns about how you get everyone from their local contracts onto one statewide contract that is not contemplated in this draft. And your labor and employment ledge council would need to be brought in on that. Let's see. They provide learning materials, equipment, and supplies, have to hire a public accountant to do an audit, again, establish policies and procedures to avoid the appearance of conflicts of interest. They could borrow money, apply for grants, and they would present materials to the voters. This is all, I think there was maybe 1 or 2 word choice modifications here, but this is all taken from current law from the Regional Career Technical Center School District subchapter. Again, all policy. The theory is it's a school district, just like the school district operating your local elementary schools and high schools. And so its duties are going to be very similar, if not the same. But it's a different world, right? CTE versus running a local elementary school or high school, and it's a statewide construct. So I imagine there are a lot of policy choices that you could make. Voter checklist, this is just saying that the statewide CTE school district voter checklist would be maintained the same way a Union School District voter checklist is maintained, and that's relying on local clerks to do that. And this language may not even be necessary depending on where you go and the rights and responsibilities you're giving to the district. The budget. So this is another large area where I've taken what is in current law and plunked it in here. But depending on the changes you make for funding, this may need to be changed significantly. So right now, the way it operates for a regional school CTE school district is that the school district board gets together and decides what's the budget for the program in the center. And then the board itself approves that budget. And then it apportions it out to the member school districts. And then that apportionment becomes a line item on the school district budget.
Can you repeat that?
Yep. So let me back up a little bit. So when you vote on your school district budget for your pre-K through 12, right? The school board comes up with a budget, presents it to the voters, and the voters vote it up and down, right? And it's only after voter approval that it becomes the budget. For career and technical education, if your school district, your pre-K through 12 school district is also operating your CTE center costs are going to be a part of that overall school district budget. Probably a separate item, but it's going to be overall that gets voted on by the voters. For the regional CTE school districts, the 4 school districts that are created under Chapter 37 to just run a CTE center, it's the board that votes on the budget. And then the budget is apportioned out to each of the member school districts based on certain factors, but essentially how many kiddos are going there, right? And then we can read subsection C. I think maybe just the easiest thing to do is just to read it. Following adoption of a budget, board, meaning in this case, the statewide CTE board, would calculate each service region's share. And then upon receipt of the notice of the amount, the share shall become a legal obligation of the school districts within each service region without need for further vote of the school district electorate, and shall be included in each school district's education spending amount. So a school district could vote up or down the entire budget, but it wouldn't be able to vote up or down the CTE section. This is current law, massaged a little to fit into this statewide construct. This is going to need to change depending on what you do for your funding and finance structure. And then this is basically section 1577. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. It's current law, but it's basically giving the CTE school district the ability to go out for a bond. The references to 24 VSA chapter 53 subchapter 1 are about municipal bond. Page 19, section 1579, career technical courses in other schools. This is current law taken from another section of chapter 37 and plunked here. Subject to any direction as to courses, teachers, or equipment that the state board may prescribe by rule. High schools may include within their courses of study pre-tech or CTE courses or both. Before establishing such a program, a high school shall consult with the statewide CTE school district. Current law has that consultation happening with your regional advisory board, which is a, just as it sounds, a regional advisory board for the CTE service region when the CTE center is operated by a local school district, not a standalone CTE school district. Again, this is all policy, but it's current law. Credits and grades earned. This is talking about what the home high school or home school of a student has to do with the grades and courses that the student receives from their CTE program. Again, this is all current law. It's underlined because remember, we repealed that chapter and we're making a new chapter. And this particular section is borrowed from another piece of the same chapter, but it's being added to a different place. So it looks like brand new language, but it is current law. Another piece of current law is comprehensive high schools. We actually have a definition section coming up, but comprehensive high schools are a defined term in Title 16 I think you will hear this term used very differently depending on who you are talking to. As a lawyer, I am using the defined term and not the term that perhaps the field uses colloquially. The defined term is that it is a school or a program other than a career and technical education center that's operating tech programs. I think you hear this term referred to as kind of a holistic view of what a high school can offer. It can offer general ed and CTE. That's nice. If it's a CTE center, it's not a comprehensive high school under state law. It might offer comprehensive programming, but that's like a colloquial way to refer to it. So anyway, this is all current law about comprehensive high schools. Okay, what does the transition look like? Am I going too fast? Is this good? Is this pace good? Okay. So again, the transition, and you're going to see a lot of X's and a lot of highlights, and these are where you plug in dates. This, depending on where you go and how this CTE school district fits into a larger, or if it fits into a larger education transformation, this may need to change, have further detail, et cetera, but this is a place to start. So board member appointments. You're saying that this is all session law, right? Because it's transition. So new board members shall be appointed by the superintendents by a certain date. Simple, right? Staggered terms. Everyone's 2 years. You don't want all those first terms to expire at once. So all I did was I took all of the even number service regions and I said, those folks serve 1 year for their initial term. So staggered terms. Transition period. As soon as practical after the appointment of new board members, the statewide school district is going to hold an organizational meeting consistent with the provisions of what an organizational meeting for a union school district would look like. This is already all spelled out in current law for when school districts merge into a union school district. Let's borrow that process a little bit. Within 10 days following the organizational meeting, the board has to hold its inaugural board meeting. And the district through its board has and shall exercise all of the authority that is necessary for it to prepare for full educational operations. This is, I think, an important concept. You're going to have two systems running at once for a little while. You're going to have this new statewide system running in this transition period to get everything up and running. Because I don't know about you, but I don't have a magic wand. So I can't just snap my fingers and have all the contracts and employment agreements and policies created overnight, right? July 1, 2025, just because, that happens, it doesn't mean that everything is operational. So this new school district needs time to get up and running. So we're going to create it. We're going to give it a whole bunch of legal authority to do everything it needs to do to get up and running, while simultaneously, everyone who's currently running a CTE center right now is going to continue doing that. Kids are going to continue going. Those programs are going to continue going. Ownership, contracts, legal obligations, they're all going to be happening. And then there's going to be a magic point in time where everyone needs to have done all of the legal mumbo jumbo that they need to do to transfer all of those rights and responsibilities to the new entity. That is no small feat. This is very complicated. The details of what that looks like behind the scenes probably are not going to live in statute. You're probably going to be giving everyone guidance on, a list of things they need to accomplish. And then it's going to be a whole bunch of suits in a room figuring out how to do that. So I imagine as we continue this process, you're all going to have a lot of really great questions and they're going to be very detailed. And my response might be, well, that falls under this broad category, but we're going to someone has to execute that, right? You're writing the law, but someone else has to execute it. So this district, it has all the authority that it needs to get up and running by a certain date. So on or before, 1 day before the operational date, your new CTE statewide school district has to have done all of the planning, transition, and other duties to be operational, including preparing for and negotiating contractual agreements and transacting any other lawful business that comes before the board. Provided, however, that the exercise of such authority by the district shall not be construed to limit or alter the authority or responsibilities of the school districts within the member supervisory unions and supervisory districts, which shall remain responsible for providing career and technical education for their students until the operational date, right? So that's what I was talking about, those dueling systems operating at the same time. You got to pick an operational date. Operational means you go live date. Again, on your operational date, the board of the CTE school district shall assume assets and contractual obligations transferred to it by the school districts that were formerly operating all of these CTE centers. And on its operational date, the CTE school district shall supplant all regional career and technical center districts in existence, and the regional career and technical center school district shall cease to exist. Now, for the school districts the local school districts that are operating CTE centers, it's going to most likely be a bunch of leasing agreements, transfer of property, assignments, fees, whatever have you. But you've got at least 4 school districts that are standalone that own their CTE centers, or if they don't own their CTE centers, they have lease agreements with a local school district. So what this is saying is, you, because you are the legislature and you breathe life into municipalities, and you can also destroy municipalities thanks to Dylan's rule. This is saying if there is a standalone CTE school district on the operational date, it's just gone. And that is literally like a magic wand from the General Assembly, because you have that power as the legislature. So that's kind of general. This is the 2 kind of dueling systems for the transition period. But what actually needs to happen in this transition period, okay? So you've got assets. So we define assets as the real and personal property, operating fund accounts, special fund accounts, trust fund accounts, accounts receivable, and other property which a school district operating a career and technical center holds title or over which it has control as those assets relate to a CTE center. So disposition of center land, facilities, and equipment. I'm not going to walk through this, but there's basically kind of 2 concepts. Whoever owns a CTE center today, there's kind of 2 options I envision, and I would invite you to take testimony for other options, or if I am completely off base here. The new school district is either going to buy, or there's going to be some transfer of title so that they are now the new owners of the actual facilities and grounds and equipment, or there's going to be some sort of lease agreement, because maybe it's not a standalone center. Maybe it's part of a high school that a local school district is running, and there's no easy way to just chop off half of it and give it to, or sell it to, convey it to the new statewide school district. So what this does is it says, figure out, you're either leasing so that the school district has the ability to continue to run these centers, or there's some conveyance of title. And I assure you there are lawyers out there who cannot wait to do this work. So there are people out there who can do this. And then if the CTE standalone center school districts have, if they actually own any of their own property, they would be transferring it to the statewide center, and then they would be dissolved anyway. So, and then all transfer of assets are subject to all encumbrances and conditions of record. So liens, easements, all of those things. Trust funds. If someone holds, if a school district running a CTE center now holds a trust fund and it is specific for just CTE programming, there would need to be a conveyance of that trust fund to the CTE center. And this is all, I shouldn't say this is all policy. These are the topics that are contemplated for assets when school districts merged into union school districts. This is a different construct. And so I invite you to take testimony on whether this makes sense. Reserve funds. If there are reserve funds that are specific to CTE, this draft contemplates those reserve funds going to the new statewide school district. Same in the other direction for liabilities. Again, we're defining liabilities. And again, to save some time, there's going to be a transfer and assumption of all liabilities on or before the operational date. And then this prohibition, a lot of this is borrowed from the Union School District chapter. So a lot of this is current law for Union School District formation. This prohibition is borrowed directly from the Union School District chapter. And that is that when you have your formation date for your CTE district, and then you've got your transitional period before the operational date, if in that kind of dual running of CTE programs, if those standalone districts or local school districts that are running CTE centers, if they incur debt in that transition period, that may not be something that needs to go to the new school district. Again, that's policy. The theory being, if there was a meeting, this is a little different. Union School District formation is a meeting of the minds. It's school boards getting together and deciding that they're going to merge, and they've got an agreement and they know all of the debts and the liabilities. You all are creating this school district, so it's a little different. But the theory being, after you all have pulled the trigger and the CTE school district springs to life to begin its transition, we're hoping that there's not a whole bunch of decisions to put on a new roof, get a new boiler, right? So there's a whole bunch of new debt that no one knew about being generated in that transition period. There may be emergencies, et cetera, an area to explore. Okay, so that was a very quick walkthrough of a very complicated and detailed construct of the creation of a statewide school district that you all are creating. The legislature is essentially chartering this new school district. That's what we just walked through. I'm going to go through a bunch of amendments to the rest of the CTE Center chapter. We are very close to the end, but I just wanted to pause there and see, you want me to just keep going or, okay.
If we just
Yep.
keep going through and then we'll start from the top
Okay.
and see if questions on each section.
So I put in a reader assistance heading here for career and technical education generally. These are amendments to the rest of the career and technical education chapter 37. There's no changes to the finance subchapters. Anything having to do with tuitioning or state assistance is not reflected in this draft. So if you didn't know that and you were looking at it, it would appear as though the recommendation here is to keep all current law, and that's fine. But I'm just noting that this draft is only governance. It's not touching on finance. So we're making some changes to definitions based on the statewide concept that we walked through. So instead of a regional CTE center, we're just calling it a CTE center. And we're saying that it is operated, and that is defined as any of the 16 CTE centers operated by the statewide career and technical education school district pursuant to subchapter 5A of this chapter. 16 is the number in current law. I'm not sure that's accurate anymore, but I'm just going to leave it and not touch it for right now. Sending district means a school district paying tuition on behalf of a student to the statewide CTE school district. Again, whether there is continuing to be a tuition concept is all policy for you to figure out on the finance side of things. There's no longer receiving districts. It's just the statewide school district. So we're going to get rid of that definition. Service region is no longer defined by the state board. It's defined by your statutes in the subchapter on statewide CTE. So we're just redefining what a service region means. And then I've kept the rest of the definitions in here just so that you can see. And we come to our comprehensive high school definition, means a public or independent school other than a career technical center that provides secondary career technical education approved under this title or this section of this title. Again, if it is a career and technical center, it is not a comprehensive high school. Responsibility of the state board. This is all, as you can see, current law with one change made here. So in order to provide regional career services, the state board shall designate service regions. We're removing that authority from the state board because you all have decided what the service regions are, or you will be deciding what the service regions are. Otherwise, in this draft, the duties and responsibilities of the state board remain the same. Section 8 is a repeal of an entire subchapter in the CTE center section, and that is the subchapter on the local centers, the centers that are operated by local school districts. We no longer have any of those, and any applicable sections that would have been applicable to a statewide school district, I've pulled out of that subchapter, and we've already walked through that language in the regional subchapter. Secondary tuition eligibility. Again, I maybe should not have included this, but I did because it's talking about who's eligible for, it's talking about tuition, but it's also talking about who's eligible for enrollment in a CTE program. And because there were local school districts running these programs, there was consideration of sending districts and residing districts, et cetera. And we're just getting rid of that language and basically saying, if you live here, you're eligible to participate in the statewide CTE program. Professional development. This is adding, we're still in Title 16. We are now out of the chapter on career and technical education, and we're going into the chapter on the Secretary of Education and the Agency of Education's duties. And we are adding a duty, you can see there are 22 before this, to the Agency of Education, and that is to provide professional development for the statewide CTE center or school district. Section 11 is a piece of session law, putting a moratorium on, and I think I may have gotten some of the dates and concepts wrong on this, but it is a concept for you all to explore. A moratorium on just opening new school CTE centers and programs while you all figure out what you're doing with this transformation. So subsection A is a moratorium on a local school district being prohibited from establishing a regional board for technical education shall be prohibited from approving any new CTE centers between now and July 1, 2028. July 1, 2028 picked because you'll see that's your contingent effective date. And then notwithstanding any provision of law to the contrary, the statewide CTE school district would be prohibited from establishing any new CTE centers basically for the first 5 years of its operation. I put a nice bright yellow placeholder in here for the finance system. And then effective dates, I have a contingent effective date, and I actually think that this effective date section needs more work, and there should actually be an effective date before July 1, 2028, for at least parts of it. But anyway, the act would take effect on July 1, 2028, provided, however, this act shall not take effect if during the 2026, 2027, or 2028 legislative session, the General Assembly enacts legislation that creates new consolidated school district boundaries. So if you all do nothing over the next 3 years to consolidate school districts or change school district boundaries, then this act would spring to life. This act would take effect. But if you change boundaries, this act would not take effect. And it would basically, if you wanted to make any changes to the CTE system, force you to be making them in concert with the other changes that you are making. So contingent effective dates, not uncommon, not super common. This is definitely, if this is where you end up going, right? If there are changes to the career and technical education system that everyone is comfortable making this year, while the rest of the transformation is figured out or foregone, whatever you decide to do, we can explore making sure this contingent effective date is as effective as possible. And that is it.
Just to clarify on the effective dates, because we haven't as a committee done different effective dates for different sections of law. What we haven't done in here, which we would have to do in here, is make something, right, that transition period effective very soon.
Mhm.
And the rest of it effective later, and that's fine to do within one document. Just to let folks know.
Yes, and that is, once you figure out all of those highlighted yellow dates, then we can start playing with more effective dates. Would you like me to continue to share my screen or stop sharing so that folks can see your discussion?
I think that you could,
Continue?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going up to the top here.
any questions on the first section or the second section? Where it spells out the regions?
So. Okay, so with the two, I'm just curious sort of legally how the two independent CTEs fit into it in terms of what we can compel basically, or, sort of legally, how does that work?
So this draft envisions them continuing to function as independent schools as they do now. So they are not owned and operated by the statewide CTE center. The current way CTE funding is done is essentially a tuition model. And so because this draft isn't making any changes to the tuitioning system, you would continue to tuition students there. And there would need to be whatever changes, if you make changes to the finance system or the funding system for CTE, you would need to factor in how the money flows to the independent schools. But there's a long history of tuition flowing to those independent schools anyway. So I think that would be a familiar concept for everyone.
Those two schools wouldn't be part of the school district.
Correct. They would continue to be owned and operated by independent schools as they currently are.
Repeat that about the independent school.
Which part? All of it?
So the CTE functions
Mhm.
that are operated by independent schools would or would not come within the single statewide CTE district.
They would not. They would be part of a service region. And the board could theoretically decide that students in these school districts or these towns would be assigned to those independent CTE centers because they are the closest ones geographically to them.
Yeah.
And there would need to be a funding mechanism to get money there. And that could work as simply as the tuition system that we currently operate. But this draft contemplates the independent schools, St. Johnsbury Academy and Linden Institute, to continue to own and operate as approved independent schools under the State Board of Education, their CTE centers. They would
Kind of be an exception to the sort
to the
of.
statewide concept, yes. And I see it as, and this is from a legal perspective, not a policy or feelings perspective, but I see it as the public school system already exists. The CTE centers that are within the public school system now would just be under a new governance system in the public system, and the approved independent school system currently exists, and that would continue as it currently exists.
Can you remind me where in the draft that exception is?
There's no exception. There doesn't need to be an exception because there's no,
But they're not listed under one of
the
the.
service regions are. But the centers themselves, so I think the closest thing I can get to you is the transition period. And avert your eyes while I scroll. So the transition period has, oh boy. The transition period, when we're talking about all those assets, the assets are only in relation to publicly operated
Okay.
schools.
Thank you.
Yep.
So does this version of the bill give that district, it does look like it gives that district voting rights on the state?
It would give the region a voting right, yes. But the voting in this draft, it would be a member appointed from the supervisory union boards of the school districts that would be sending their kiddos to those approved independent schools. It would not be someone from the approved independent schools sitting on the board. All policy. And again, depending on the policy choices you make and whether or not there is a larger education transformation, I imagine that your board membership is going to change.
Other questions?
Another section.
On this part here. And I think there will be a lot more to discuss. I think as we're looking at, right now, that's set it aside in regions. But when we talked about, I'm gonna take St. Albans, for example, they're already working with Bridgeford. So would we, include all of that as one region, Bridgeford, Montgomery, and we have, and I think this is my thought, look at regions where we have mountains splitting in districts, and how does that work? Is it better for a region that's on one side of the mountain to be now into a different CTE region than it would be for that? So those are all things that have to be thought of and discussed, and there's a lot.
Yeah, just I can follow up on that. And I just know my particular region, and to me, the region that you described here, kind of makes sense in terms of, I don't know about the other regions, but just want to comment that it makes sense in terms of what I know from my region.
I can take no credit from that because I literally cribbed all of those from a document on the agency's website that I assume everyone's actually using. So I hoped it would make sense. But the beauty and the burden of the work you have in front of you, should you choose to continue to work on that, is you get to blow up everything and make all the choices you want. You are the legislature and you can charter and you are creating a municipality here. Yes.
The world is our oyster.
I wanted to just call out one thing that you touched on but didn't say directly, is that transition costs money. And that, creating a system to get it to set up the new system that has to run at the same time as the current system is running is just a small part of some of the costs that will be incurred to move to any new system. I just feel like we have to be really aware of that and upfront with that there's not a cost savings initially for sure. And I'm not sure that there's a cost savings down the road. What I am sure of is that if we do this well, there will be better equity of programming across the state. And that is the goal, is to get better training and opportunity availability to all regions of the state. So I feel like that has to be.
But I think along with that comes better outcomes and better workforce, more workforce within the state. And the ability to draw people into the state too. When you have strong education system, you'll draw people into the state as well. Sure.
Just to follow up on both of those comments, I just had a question. It probably totally beyond the scope of what you've been charged with doing. But the committee heard testimony on a couple of reports by the consulting group APA. And I think there was one in 2023 and one in 2025. And they contained a host of recommendations, a lot of them, policy recommendations around expanding opportunities for CTE for students. My sense is that you didn't try. Your charge wasn't to try to deal with those issues in those recommendations, so it would be our purview to decide whether any of those recommendations should be included in the draft. I'm looking to the chair and vice chair.
I mean, one of the things that they recommended is to simplify the governance,
I know.
right? So this is simplifying the governance, right? There are more things that they recommended, and you're right, that's our decision, our choice to look at those things and figure out, does that fit? And some of that might not fit until there is a board that's deciding what the programming is.
I
Right.
appreciate
And
that.
it might not be at this.
It might not be a statutory
Yeah.
matter, I understand.
So we have to figure it out.
Thank you.
Are we moving into transition? Since you mentioned,
Oh, the next section of the bill?
yeah. So, because it sounded like you were going into transition.
If there's no other questions.
Okay. So, section, it's on page 24. And it talks about the centers owned by regional CT.
You're off the screen. so
Yes, I thought we were going into just discussion, but I will.
I think it's.
Right back up.
Discuss it. If you have one, we've got, thanks.
So one of the concerns that I have is that as we force merge. Not that any of our CT centers would do this, but something that we should be concerned about because it did happen when we did Act 46, which is local schools sold off property or conveyed property, not necessarily sold, to municipalities, and did drag in debt as well, versus surpluses, which were spent down. Is that going to be taken care of with this? Because I see, what I see here is that on or before operational date.
Mhm.
And that might give some significant amount of time to do that. And I'm just concerned about that.
I think the way to do that is you pick a point in time. Most likely the closest in time effective dates, probably July 1, 2025. It would be all of the property or debt or whatever owned or incurred on that as of that date would need to be conveyed or assumed by the new statewide school district. You can't really do much about a law that you might enact and the field taking some actions based on what you might do. But once that law becomes effective, you could say, okay, whatever you own on this date, you cannot give to anyone other than the CTE center.
And maybe that's just something to think about. I don't know if you guys if you experience that in your municipalities, but it's definitely something that
Well, at
could
the bottom
happen.
of page 25 is the beginning of it, and we might want to be a little more robust about it.
And I will just say that Act 46 was a voluntary process. And its predecessors, Act 156 and 153 from 2010 and 2012, were all voluntary. It was, here are some incentives, here are the goals of the state, talk amongst yourselves and merge. And so that's very different. And I know that there was a state board order that required some mergers. You all are chartering new municipalities, and so you get to be as specific and directive as you want to be. And so thinking of all of the things that concern you about this, you can, we're not going to be able to plan for everything, but you can plan for those concerns in a way that you couldn't in Act 46 because it was a voluntary process. But you are creating municipalities, so you get to decide all of those dates, all of the exceptions, all of the directives, et cetera. What the final picture looks like, you all get to decide. The luxury of my job is I get to tell you that in the universe of possibilities, this is legal and this makes sense. But you might hear from the field well, that's nice that it exists in the universe of possibilities, but I don't know how we're gonna do this, right? So just because it makes sense to me, because it legally checks some boxes, doesn't mean it works for the field or it meets your goals or whatever. And I'm also not an education policy expert. I am your legislative attorney assigned to the education policy portfolio. So there are probably many minds out there who have some thoughts that I would never think of in, on all sides of where you are going. So all of that to say, yes, I think that I think one way to do that is you pick a date and you say, as of this date, you can't give it to anyone else. Or you can't incur more debt. And if you do, then you're on the hook. And there is some language we can look at for a union school district formation that talks about if it's a standalone school, if it's a local school district, they're still an entity. And so if they incur debt, it would just go into their budget and their, whatever. But if it was a regional school district that you're dissolving, we can leave it open for a little bit of time in order for it to wrap up business that couldn't be wrapped up.
I appreciate that. Are we on the transition piece again? I notice on page 33. Again, it's moratorium concept. No new centers, that certainly makes sense. It also says or programs for, pretty significant period of time. What's meant by programs there? Thinking, maybe a big picture kind of program, maybe an individual program offered in cities.
I will be honest and say that I think that this needs more specificity, this section.
Yeah.
So the agency was in, they talked about wanting to create a BOCES for the state. So I'm curious if you can just talk legally, the contrast that.
Absolutely. And thank you for asking, because this is what I spent all last session working on. So BOCES stands for Boards of Cooperative Education Services. This is your current law. This is a concept that exists all over the country. I think prior in this chapter in Title 16, you all added last session. And I think prior to you adding this, there were something like between 39 and 46 other states with a similar model. So this is a very common model. And it is just as it sounds, it is a cooperative. It is structures that currently exist getting together to form a cooperative to provide joint services. And current law in Vermont has a BOCES. Oops, I guess maybe this isn't the right one. Let's see. Current law in Vermont has a BOCES as supervisory unions voluntarily forming this political subdivision of the state to provide joint services to their member districts. If you wanted to create a statewide CTE BOCES, you would need to make a whole host of changes to this chapter because this chapter did not contemplate that. Does that make sense? Okay. The term BOCES is used differently in every state that has this concept. It is a term of art and it means different things depending on where you are. Again, I'm a lawyer, so I'm dealing with the law and the black and what I have to work with for a BOCES concept is what we currently have in law. You could blow this up. You could make changes to the whole concept. You could make a standalone concept called something else for CTE. There are so many policy choices that you could make, but I think that was an excellent question. The concept in Vermont state law right now is that supervisory unions voluntarily get together for shared services.
reason why you're not seeing BOCES, the vice chair and myself had conversation with Ledge Council, and we decided to take the track of most traveled, I guess, where it made more sense. We already have a structure that we can pull from.
It's kind of the same result, but familiar.
And fewer layers.
Yeah.
Because you keep,
Right.
right,
Yeah.
if you would do a BOCES, you keep all the current structure the way it is and add another layer.
Oh,
Yeah.
I see what you mean, yeah.
So
Yep.
that didn't feel like it was gonna streamline.
Makes
And if
sense.
you want to explore BOCES.
No. Not really, not really.
Worst.
I just wanted to understand.
No, it was a great question. I think it's good for us to actually listen and try to understand a little bit of what that would look like if we went down that road.
Oh, you guys keep going, because I'm going a totally different direction.
Yeah. Go on.
But, no, but go for it.
Okay, go ahead, Herb.
So on page 19, I know, I think that you said that you were carrying forward, I think current law around regional centers. I'm just curious about the credits and grades. And it talks about CTE credits shall be applied by the school towards by the public school towards graduation requirements. One of the recommendations, I think, of the APA reports had to do with CTE credits with high school credits. So is this current law or is this a suggestion for new law?
This is current law.
Ah, okay. Well, that's interesting. Thank you.
Thought I'd like to offer just to help me keep track of it as we get further into the weeds on things. The limitation or prohibition on new programs, if they have the capacity to do it, and if there is in fact an urgent need, and I'm thinking specifically about the tour of the airport, the BTV, and the work that is being done there in the aircraft industry with Burlington Tech. That's just an example. I hate to see us needlessly foreclose those kinds of options and developments while, forgive me for belittling things or sounding like I am, but while papers are getting shuffled and, the cards are being redealt. I'd like to see us still be able to meet those needs as we have the capacity to do so.
Yeah, programs might not be the right word in that section. I think, Beth mentioned probably that prohibition needs more work.
Right. But that's just the thought that I had that I wanted to share to help me track it, make sure it gets followed.
I think if you think about this moratorium and, this transformation, that at that point, the statewide school district will be in operation. So there could be language that would allow for things like that to happen, but it would have to have the approval of that new school board. So, and same with taking on added debt, there's any emergency, any of that type of stuff. So I think there's a lot of things that we can think about that could allow for any of that to happen.
I have a question around adult tech. Where would that fit and how would that be integrated?
So I haven't made any changes to the adult tech language currently. Let's see. So I didn't make any changes to subchapter 4 eligibility and tuition, and that's where the adult student language lives. And I believe it's there and let's see. You know what? And there might be some language that lives in subchapter 3, which I repealed, which I would make sure that we are meeting your goals here. But currently, CTE centers are required to offer adult programming. And so that would be a policy choice for you all. And I know that there's federal law and requirements that I am not intimately familiar with, just enough to know that they exist, on requirements around offering adult ed and what that looks like. So policy choice for you on how to handle that.
I think that's a section that I think next year we may be taking a look at, and it may not live here in this title. It could go in another title. Because right now, adult, I think as we've discussed here, is really not under anyone's umbrella. And so we have to, that's a conversation, the next conversation we have. Once we get this conversation started and this starts down the road, then we've got to figure out adult ed. And who, where should it live? And there has to be a tie-in with the career centers somehow. But it's not controlled by. And how do we control it, right? Who does it sit under? But then does the school district? How does it intertwine with the school, with the new district? And that's, I think, going to be an interesting discussion and it's create some complex complexities as well. But I think right now we don't know that we want to. I think we just leave things the way they are as far as that goes right now, and then tackle that down the road.
Just thought we were kicking the hornet's nest harder.
I think we kicked it pretty hard right now.
Yeah.
Maybe taking us into a different direction as well, but I am curious about the comprehensive high schools.
Oh, boy. I know nothing. I really know nothing. It's the whole thing.
Sorry.
So what are you curious about?
How do they fit in to all of this? I'm trying to read through the statutes, and I guess I'm a little maybe confused and concerned about the fact that they seem to offer career technical, like lowercase c career technical education, and how that differentiates from the large C career technical education. And then like, would governance be involved with them? And then the last thing is just that we've been hearing testimony that CTE in its current various components is a growth area in our education system, and there's a large want for it. So it seems like we have these two systems that are kind of doing the same thing, and does it make sense to marry them?
That's a great question. I don't know, other than having a bee in my bonnet over everyone using the term incorrectly. I think this is a great question for the field. One of the things that enables me to do my job is reach out and ask for examples of, like, can you give me an example of such and such a program that's actually running in the field? And so I would suggest that you or I reach out and get some examples of where and what comprehensive high schools are and what they look like, because this is it. This is the law that I have on the screen. And the definition is all I have to go on in Title 16. And I don't know of an example to walk through how it is different and how it would fit in the system.
Yeah, I'm trying to, I have to go back through and see where I found it, but I think it's the academies are technically comprehensive high schools, some
Okay.
of which have CTE in them, some of which don't. And that was like a statute from like 1982. I'm
Well,
trying to find where I can find
if
it.
you don't change it, it's still good. So let me see what I've changed to. See. Okay, okay. Let me get back to you on comprehensive high schools.
Okay.
I'm just gonna follow up on what Emily's saying. We heard testimony, and I think the AP report also, both of them, called attention to a certain amount of friction, tension between high schools, whether or not comprehensive or not, and CTEs, and that wasn't always helpful. And where am I going here? It doesn't seem, this is a great start. I really appreciate it, but that kind of issue is something that, I think I'd like to explore the APA recommendations around that to see if we can get better alignment between the high schools, comprehensive, and the CTEs, the CTE structure that we're proposing, because I think.
The conflict is about funding, right? The conflict is about funding.
Well, I think it was more than funding. It's what I mean, there were things about graduation requirements, there were bell times, and there was, I think the AP report had a few different issues around, alignment that wasn't perfect.
It's all gonna depend on whether or not when I look at the independent, St. Johnsbury, Linden, they have tech programs, they have a tech center. That's the St. Johnsbury area, but if they want to, they won't be part of the new district. But if they are providing courses and opportunities and everything that AOE has put forward, and there may be, and I'm just thinking off the top of my head that, they're gonna have to fulfill an obligation in order to receive the anticipated block grant, if that's what we're talking about, to educate children in the CTE, right? So I think they'll have to follow some rule, regulation, law, whatever it is, in order to receive those funds. And if they don't, then they have to figure out how they do it on their own, right?
And maybe I've missed this. So we know that right now there are local high schools that are starting up their own shop classes again, and those kinds of programs. And I know it references like the moratorium, no new centers and no new programs. I take it that that's sort of what that implies. So what happens to those programs that are attached to just a local school? I would think that they're already getting money from their local school because it's just part of the regular program, but does the certification carry through? How does that interplay with the state as a whole?
So are you talking about the moratorium or just the concept of programming in local high schools and the
Programming.
statewide? Okay. So the statewide CTE school district would be operating all of the CTE centers. And then you all have to make you don't have to, you have the opportunity to make some policy decisions on how much career and technical education can be provided outside of a CTE center that is operated by the statewide system. Currently, there are state board rules that everyone has to follow, regardless of where they are related to CTE. And there has to be a consultation with the regional advisory board for that high school boat making class or whatever. That's all policy for you all. You can open the door You can allow more discretion at the local school district level as long as they're following state board rules. You can allow total control by the statewide school district, that they are the ones approving these programs. You can require the state board to amend rules. You can have a whole new statute with criteria. I mean, the world is your oyster, whoever over here said it, for how that works. And I think that's a major policy question.
Yeah, for me, that was one reason why that came up, was because I know that a school in my district, they're trying to increasingly become a magnet school. And part of what they're doing that is bolstering both their arts and their tech at the local school. And so there was a big budget thing that just went through about money for that tech piece. And so I'm just curious what would become of that.
Where's your tech center?
Well, Randolph, but the Bethel Royalton High School is pumping up their own tech stuff because it's quite a drive to Randolph.
But do the voters in your district realize that they're paying for the tech center as well?
I think hard saying not knowing.
Yeah, and that's I think a lot of sending schools don't understand, or the voters in the sending schools don't understand that they're paying for the regional tech center and not realizing that they may be putting money into tech, into their own facilities as well. So it'd be kind of a double. Hopefully this will be part of the solution for those issues. Other questions? Michael?
The comprehensive high schools is very intriguing, and if we crazy idea, the idea of like folding the high schools into CTEs as because I mean, I think of high schools, it's kind of prepping you for whether you're going to go to college or you're not going to go to college or you're going to take up a career, right? I mean, we're thinking about going big. Could that be a part of the conversation of just making all our high schools that we're preparing you for your future? And
Funding were unlimited, and we could build structures in places around the state where we knew they would be available to the most number of students. We could build, right? If funding were unlimited, we could build those kinds of campuses for all students in the state. And wouldn't that be wonderful, right? And then we have reality of 2025, and we have to work within the system that we. So I'm not saying it's policy, right? We just have to understand what's within the realm of right?
And I would agree with that. I don't have experience with other districts in Vermont, but I think of like Central Vermont District, U32 could probably handle the majority, if not all, of the students. Well, I know they could with Spalding and U32, they could handle both high schools and a career center. So with you sell off the properties that are not being used and then, add an addition on, you might be able to make that high school even bigger. And I don't know. Just something to think about. And maybe it doesn't work for Jericho, but you could write it into the legislation of where it does work. Let's do it. I don't know.
It just construction funding, right? Like, I mean, we just did 33 pages of transforming a system. Now we're gonna, yeah, I mean, yes, where's the funding? That's for.
Yeah.
I mean, I love that dream.
Well, the Career Center, I'm sorry, Central Vermont Career Center is already thinking about purchasing or building a new facility.
And
So a sort of a big picture policy question seems to be this, right, like this system with CTE and like vesting in CTE. Kind of to your point, it's kind of like, are we setting up two tracks, right? Where we have kids who go to CTE, kids who stay in regular high school. And just thinking in terms of making sure that we're providing the best opportunity for everybody and the best education for everybody. So like the CTEs have, you know, the English and the math and the history incorporated, but also the high schools enable kids to have other experiences. So I mean, I guess I'm just saying that's a tension that I think you're speaking to as well. And like some CTEs, like in Burlington, kids can go, like as part of that health sciences CTE program, they'll go to the Burlington Tech Center for half a day, and then they'll go to back to high school for half a day. So anyway, it's not really a question. It's just a
Yeah.
thought about like, what is the,
Well, and I think it's important to talk about programming separate from governance.
yeah, right.
Because what we're looking
Yeah.
at is the governance.
Yeah.
We're not talking about changing the programming to a high school
Right.
4 years where students go all 4 years to this tech high school.
True.
That's not what
It's a
we're talking
2-year,
about. It's
true.
still, you know, within the system, right? Within,
Yeah.
and that's the education committee's purview more than ours, I think.
Yeah.
Right? It's still eligible to 11th and 12th graders
Yeah.
for specific programming that is available in
Yeah.
their, you know,
Yeah,
and this would make more, I guess, it would make it easier to go to different regions for different programming that was
Yeah.
available. It would make like
Yeah.
a lot of other things easier, but we're
yeah,
not to say we couldn't, although it's not
Right.
really our purview, but
yeah, I get it.
reimagine
I
it
get
as a
Yeah,
4-year different kind of a thing. That's really not where we are.
About big dreams. Just thought, I'm not entirely sure what I think about it, but there's a lot of chatter, conversations in my neck of the woods, Addison County, about, well, if we're going to 5 districts, you know, for regular ed, and we're going to 1 district for CTE, you know, they're thinking, well, maybe we can have some savings, consolidation, and as well sort of reduce some of the tension between the CTE system and regular education by having sort of a district that combines the two, CTE and regular ed, for say a county. I'm not sure all the ins and outs in that, but I want to throw that out that's something that some, you know, pretty thoughtful people are talking about in my neck of the woods.
Again, programming, right?
Well, no, I was thinking about the governance aspect of it, as opposed to programmers. So there would, instead of, so what they're talking about, again, I need to know the ins and outs. They're talking about one school board for replacing the 3 existing school districts, and CTE board. We have a regional tech center board.
So that would be that would be maintaining multiple governance systems for CTE in the state. Because this would be a CTE that is part of a different board. I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, you'd effectively, I think, have, you know, something like 15. You'd have 15 as opposed to 5, you know, districts, and 15 as opposed to 1 CTE. Correct. I'm not saying this is the thing. I just wanted to let you know that there are people talking about that.
There'll be people talking about a lot of different things.
I understand.
When, want to drill down a little bit now. So if this gets created, the CP structure that we have now goes with. So that means the regional advisory boards are gone. So then we need to start thinking about the regions now of who, and I don't know if we could leave this up to the new board. Or we can put it into statute, who's responsible for the region. So do we have a principal for each region or a director? Right now, they're directors. And then do we have a regional board that is responsible for creating a budget that's submitted to board? And is responsible. I'm just wondering, thinking, do we empower the regional advisory boards, give them more authority on what they do? Creating programs or looking at programs, deciding if moving it on, deciding if they should eliminate programs, all those types of things.
Is that a question for me?
Well, I guess, where should that sit? Is that, and I know it's a policy question, but I think right now that is in statute. The regional advisory boards are just that, they're just advisory. Some do a lot, others don't do.
So I think it depends, again, it can live wherever you want it to live. What I have drafted, the skeleton of what I have drafted does not have the concept of a regional advisory board. It has your school board with membership from each of the regions being the construct for how voices are heard from the different regions. You could absolutely establish or keep the concept of regional advisory boards. The powers and duties of each, the school district board and the regional advisory boards. It depends on what your policy goals are, but you would want to look carefully at how to balance those. Yeah, I mean, I think it can live wherever you want it to live, or it doesn't have to live, or it can be a new concept or a hybrid concept. But yes, local input and what that looks like, I think, is up for you to decide on how streamlined you want the process to be, how much local influence you want, and how that is shared. Is it 2 members from each region on the school board? So you have a giant school board. Is it 1 member from each region and a regional advisory board? Again, if there is a larger education transformation and consolidation of school districts, what we have looked at today may actually be totally different, right? So I haven't built that in.
I think that's something we need to try to envision. I think because we created this one board that oversees 17 centers. That now, what is the governance of those centers? How does that work?
Oh, so I'm envisioning a director at each
Yeah.
and a superintendent for the school district.
Right, so you have the superintendent. So if we want to think about the same, or think about school structure, we have a principal, so we'll have somebody.
Yep.
And then the way we have things now is we have boards that create budgets.
But not at every school, right? If it's a district,
Right.
the district, yeah.
Well,
So
depending, I mean, where I'm from, we're all school districts. We're not.
Supervisor.
But I have I have another town that's in the central supervisor that has done that.
Yeah.
Right? So I think we need to look at that model of how they've done that. But we're still, we have regions. We're trying to make a governance structure, but we're still
I think what I'm being a little cagey about is the conversations that are happening outside of this committee related to the education transformation, which is all policy for you all to decide what you want to do with it, is what would lead to consolidated school districts such that there wouldn't be regions. It would be, what I'm envisioning is 15 school districts across the state. And I hope this clip doesn't go viral somewhere, but you know, like some number of consolidated school districts. And when I say I'm envisioning, it's just based on the conversations that you all are having. And that those larger consolidated school districts become the member school districts of this statewide school district. And so you've got one school board theoretically for that member district, which may act as the regional board for that school district in relation to, do you see what I'm saying? It's all so dependent on how this all fits into the larger picture.
So
But
for
I
us,
hear
yeah,
you.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should think about it, but I don't think it's anything we put into statute yet. I think that comes after we understand what the rest of the system is gonna look like. Gotcha.
And it doesn't it doesn't have to. This is all policy for you all.
But I think
Yeah.
if we're going to create a system that is separate but intertwined, right? Then we have to wait to see what the other piece is going to be before we can start drilling down into.
Just to build on that a little bit, I also think understanding how programs are developed is going to be part of, because of the community, regional nature of the requirement on how those CTE programs are developed.
Yeah.
I've been noodling a lot on what Herb was saying. I think what you're saying is should there be a CTE district on its own, or should CTE be each new district, whatever number that happens to be, has CTE within it, and that's encapsulated in that district, and should that be the governance structure that we're looking at for the state?
I mean, that's,
I just-
that's,
it took me a
I'm
while
saying, I
to
agree with it,
process
but
and
that's the
understand.
concept and the value in terms of governance, right? Is that you know, you do something about the testimony you've heard about some inherent tension between, you know, regular and CTE, because it would be within one, for each region, however many regions there are, it would be within one, under the purview of one board.
Right. Yep. And so then we would have to understand, I'm sorry, Emily, but we would have to understand what the pros and cons are to that in offering similar quality, you know, robust programming, right? All of the pieces that we're trying to
Huge other issues.
fit. Okay, great. Sorry, Emily.
Oh, no, you're fine. You're fine. It just, I guess just to add on to that, and maybe this is more of a policy question that is in another committee, but it does sort of seem to me that CTE is more of a educational, like, delivery structure, you know, having like part of the day be like book learning and the other part of the day being hands-on learning. And is that something that could just sort of structurally be spread? Just, I think the thing that I keep thinking of is that it's largely focused at kind of advanced manufacturing and these sorts of things, but also we've heard from the captive insurance people, like we have a need to train more folks there. I was just hearing from emergency services, they need more dispatchers, we need more actuaries, like there's all of that stuff that we could start training young people early. So yeah, sorry.
And, you know, I think one thing that when we were having discussions with Secretary Saunders was, you know, really they talk about education, and they talk about training.
Yeah.
And we've done that, and we talked about that in the SOG web. What's the difference between education and what's the difference between education and training? Are they both educational? Or,
Learning's taking place in both.
right,
Do we know how many students are in tech centers right now?
Somebody has that.
I know.
Yeah, not me. Yeah, I
Say, do we, like, does anyone in this room know? I
no. But I'm sure that's a number we can get.
mean, we only have, what, 10,000 juniors and seniors total, so.
Well, you have pre-tech too. You have some students that are in pre-tech, but it's not really prevalent right now. It's, I think, an aspiration as we go down the road.
But if juniors and seniors, maybe it's 1,000 students.
Probably more than that, but not a whole lot.
I think about 5 rings about, but I think it's in one of these weekends.
We have anything else?
Oh. Let's see.
What I'm saying.
Would you like to see any changes at this point? Like, do you have any direction for me at this point? I'm gonna look into comprehensive high schools. I'm gonna get you a number for how many students are in the CTE system. What else
I
can I
don't
do?
think so. I think now's, it's, you know, the cat's out of the bag. The draft is posted. Now it's time to start hearing from people, and I think the first person we'll invite in Secretary Saunders. And then we'll have Jody come on from CTE directors.
Right.
You know, we'll invite the principals, superintendents associations in. And let's start hearing from people as, and that'll start next week. I want to give people time to look at this, digest it, understand it, come back to us with constructive criticisms and other directions that we could consider going down. And I'm hoping no one comes in here and just says, no, we can't do this, because we are gonna do something. So I think if everybody realizes that and accept that, we can move forward. So we're not really interested in listening to people saying, no, we can't do this. Okay. Any other questions before Beth goes? Beth, thank you very much. It's,
Pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That's really helpful.
so let's take 10 minutes. We'll come back at 11 and we'll start taking more testimony on 242. Okay.